It's 4 o'clock, so we can call this to order, but I'm not chairman, so I'll start it off.
We take roll at committee meetings?
We do not. I would state for the record if somebody was missing. And then we would also do the AB 2449 if somebody was remote, and that would be on the record. Otherwise, we
You
don't.
do have a cold, don't you?
I do.
Can you bring a mask? I could care less.
So we have to do the all important committee elect an officer. So our chair, so you guys get to decide who you decide on the chair.
Okay,
Roshan vote out.
I think, let me throw out an opinion here, just for starters. I think Bill shouldn't be chairman because he's the president of the board. We've got to distribute responsibilities out. I think, Steve, you're gonna find that I have some pretty strong opinions and some direction that I'd like to go. And so the role of a chairman is to more or less
Moderate.
to be a facilitator, make sure everybody gets their say, not push a particular agenda. So my suggestion would be you, if you're willing to take it.
I'll take it. I have no objections with that.
Okay, three of none then.
No 2449s today.
No.
Any public comment? I see we have some other, the Emily White voice.
Emily White is with Robert's office.
Okay,
Okay.
Would be a public comment on anything that is not on the agenda. We have speaker cards when we get to the actual agenda item 5.
okay, but no public comment. Chevelle,
Yeah, I think Mark is on.
okay. Well, absent any public comment, then let's move on to item 5, review of various personnel related matters. Jeff?
Steve,
I'm
Yes.
just checking my audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, Robert.
Robert?
okay, I'd like to make a suggestion with item 5 is review of various personnel related matters. And I note that in the agenda, in the staff report, there's a lot of potential items there that are up for discussion, which could easily take 2 hours.
The various, you're right.
It was clear to me last week, a week from today at the board meeting, that the scheduling of a personnel committee was driven by your
Can you hear me?
question. As to what was happening with the questionnaire, the employee questionnaire. So I would suggest that we start with that. Because in my view, that's the critical path, because we have certain steps we have to take in order to make that advance. Whereas complicated staff study that they're doing, what's the name of the study? It's the
Class and comp study, and there's also,
study.
yeah,
There's
Can you hear
also
me now?
Yeah, Robert, we can hear you.
Manuals, all kinds of stuff going on, but I'm convinced that that's all moving ahead forthwith. But the question of a questionnaire is gonna take some time to kind of get resolved between us. So my suggestion is we start with that.
I think Robert wants to talk first here.
Robert wants to talk first. Well, lawyers always have precedence.
yes. Please go ahead, sir.
Go ahead, Robert.
Can't hear us.
Oh, too bad, no attorney.
Robert, can you hear us?
Welcome to enter your access code.
Lifting the speaker at the other end.
He may be calling you?
I don't know. I see something.
Oh, like he's trying to call.
Followed by pound.
Can you hear us, Robert?
Not if you can hear us.
Robert, can you hear us?
Okay, I can hear you now. I have to use my phone to hear you.
Put him on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, yep.
Oh, all right then. Okay. I'm sorry about that glitch here. It doesn't want to pick up my audio on the computer.
Go ahead, Robert. You have the floor.
Okay, then have you started the meeting already?
Yes, we've started the meeting and we picked Steve Quillisi for the chair.
Okay, then. All right. Thank you, Jeff. I just want to make some preliminary remarks. On the WebEx is my associate, Emily White, who will be present at this meeting for the bulk of it. I'm here primarily to give the board some direction, given where we are at on agenda item number 5. And this statement I'm going to make is pursuant to the OVSD Board of Directors bylaws. In particular, I'm going to be referring to Article 6 regarding the governing board and Section 2 ethics guidelines. Within that section of your bylaws is a section called 2.7 communications. And let me just read that to you. Directors shall publicly share substantive information that is relevant to a matter under consideration by the board, which they may have received from sources outside of the public decision-making process. So let me read it one more time. Directors shall publicly share substantive information that is relevant to a matter under consideration by the board, which they may have received from sources outside of the public decision-making process. This section in your bylaws has to do with what is called ex parte communications, basically receiving anything outside the public hearing process. Now, this section refers to the board, but you are a board constituted standing committee, so this section would apply to any committee created by the board of directors as well. So with that being the case, this also has Brown Act implications, because the receipt of ex parte communications, although not disallowed under the Brown Act, is clearly designed to prevent what is called a serial meeting, where one or more directors receive information outside of the public hearing process, and in the course of receiving that information, deliberations are conducted outside of public hearing view, and then decisions are made without the full knowledge and disclosure before the public. So that's why this is in your bylaws. It's in there under the section called ethics guidelines, because this has to do with the integrity of public agency decision-making. Every director is supposed to abide by these ethics guidelines, and it also behooves me as your legal counsel to ask questions of the board prior to any type of hearing where you may have received substantive information about the matter at hand. So if it is okay with the committee chair, I'd like to just proceed with my questions. Is that okay, Director Quillisi?
That's fine. I think, in fact, that it might be good to have an agenda item on each committee and board meeting agenda to note any ex parte communications may have taken place with regard to any agenda item.
You know, I don't necessarily think an agenda item is needed for that, Director Quillisi. What probably is most likely needed is just a opportunity for me to step in at the beginning of these types of matters and just ask, or just as a routine basis, did any person on the committee or on the full board receive ex parte information about this item? And it can be simply just going down the line and asking, you know, yes or no. And if yes, then we'll have to have substantive follow-up questions. Would that be sufficient?
We do that on the Ohio Planning Commission, and it's not a
Okay,
numbered
I think it's
item,
I
on
think
the
it's a good
agenda.
practice. Yeah, I think it's a good practice, Director Quillisi, and this particular item raises that issue to that level here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let me just start with Director Kentosh. Director Kentosh, have you received information related to any of the following items in agenda number 5? Received information related to the employee satisfaction survey, or class and compensation study, or employee handbook? Have you received this information directly or indirectly from anyone prior to this meeting, and in particular, prior to the November 27th, 2023 Board of Directors meeting?
I have received nothing from anybody on the questionnaire for the job satisfaction survey. The next one was, the last one was personnel manual.
The next one was the class and comp study.
The only thing I received is the general manager's description of what was going on and staff report that he gave to the board. So I think I have seen nothing else related to the compensation study other than what Jeff has provided us. The last one was the personnel manual. I was going through the agenda packet for the November board meeting, and there was a lot, it was 600 pages, and I may have received it there. There was one document that was particularly long, and it might have been the bylaws, it might have been the personnel survey. I'm not sure if I saw it there or not, but it would have been on the agenda packet for November board meeting. And as far as, is there anything else?
No, that's it.
Let me explain also what may have raised this whole issue that we're talking about today. In October, I think it was October, Director Stone suggested to the board at the regular board meeting that we do some kind of a job satisfaction study, and we talk about it at the following board meeting. And so I have in my possession 2 job satisfaction surveys that I have either done myself in prior employment or that a board that I am on did for their employees. So they were job satisfaction surveys. At least one of them I know is in the public record. The other one, they told me it wouldn't matter if it was in the public record or not. So I sent a email copy of those surveys to Director Stone. We had no deliberations or discussions about it. I just said, here's a sample of a couple of job satisfaction surveys that I am familiar with. And that was the extent of our discussion, other than I did ask him at one point if he had received it. Like it was at the board meeting a week ago today. I asked him if he had received that, and he said he had. We did not discuss it. Any other questions?
Yeah, the only other question I would have is whether or not you sent that sample to anyone other than Director Stone.
I sent it to Allison. I don't remember if I copied Jeff. I don't think I copied Jeff, but I sent it to Allison. Same time I sent it to Director Stone. Or at least, I may have sent it to Director Stone twice and copied Allison on it once. I don't remember exactly. But Allison was the other person that got it.
Okay, and then just a final question, Director Kantosh, did you speak to anybody about either one of these items, the satisfaction survey, the class and comp study, or the personnel handbook, other than what you've said, other than the people that you've already mentioned?
I did not discuss, as far as I recall, I did not discuss those 3 documents with anybody other than those people.
All right then. Thank you very much. Let me turn to Director Stone. Same question, Director Stone. Have you received information directly or indirectly from anyone related to the employee satisfaction survey, class and comp study, the employee handbook prior to this meeting, and in particular prior to the November 27, 2023 board meeting?
Just those surveys that Director Kantosh sent me.
Have you received information from any current or past employee, either directly or indirectly, about these items?
No information. I did have some questions one day from a few people in the field. The answers to those questions was the board is working on it.
And can you identify the people in the field? Are these current employees of the OVSD?
Yes.
And do you recall their names?
Israel and Dwight.
And again, have you received any information from any former employees or recently retired employees of OVSD regarding any of these matters?
No,
Have you received any complaints from prior employees regarding any of these matters?
yes,
And can you tell me who those are?
Mark Chevelle,
Anyone else?
Lynn DeBoe.
And were those complaints related in general or specifically to either the satisfaction survey, the class and comp study, or the personnel manual?
No, they weren't anything specific. It was general.
General complaints about OVSD or what?
Yes.
Okay, then. All right, and did you share any of the information you received from either Mr. Chevelle or Ms. DeBoe with any of your fellow board members?
No,
All right. Thank you very much, Director Stone. And Director Quillisi, same question. Have you received information or spoken to any current or former employees related to either the employee satisfaction survey, the class and comp study, or the employee handbook, either prior to this meeting or specifically prior to the November 27, 2023 board meeting?
Okay, first of all, no communications on either the class and comp study or the second one?
Personnel handbook.
Or the satisfaction survey.
Or the satisfaction survey. Nothing on the class and comp study or the satisfaction survey.
Okay.
I did receive a phone call from Mark Chevelle and one from Lynn DeBoe with general concerns about topics that are in the employee handbook. And Lynn DeBoe gave me a few sheets of paper, which I scanned and provided to Director Berg, who was the board chair at the time. We had no discussion of it. Just I wanted him to know that I had received those.
And can you tell
I
me?
have not
just
discussed them with any other director.
Okay. And can you tell me generally what the 2 sheets of paper contain?
There were old emails and I think a couple of handwritten sheets. I don't have them with me.
Okay, then.
I have them in my files at home.
All right, then. And then as far as the statements from the phone calls you received from Chevelle and DeBoe, they were just general concern. Did you use the word optics?
I don't recall using the word optics.
You said general concerns about the operation of the handbook, or what did you say? I'm sorry.
About topics.
Oh, topics.
Handbook.
I'm sorry, I missed the T
Oh, that's all right.
in topic. All right, so just general concerns about the topics, and that's the matter before you today, or just generally the matter before you today, is that correct? Yeah, all right then. All right, that's all I need from a disclosure standpoint, and again, it's important again to maintain the integrity of a public hearing process and public information and public decision-making, that these types of communications are explained. And so I will be doing this on a routine basis on matters of public concern. So I thank the board for indulging me these questions. And again, I'm just trying to comply with and implement your bylaws. All right?
I would like to ask Mr. Kwong a question about what we're allowed to do. If I have a document that is in the public domain and it's from another water district and I want to email it to another director and have no discussion, it's just for his information only, and it's for future discussion at a public meeting like today, but we had no deliberate, am I allowed to do that?
You are allowed to do that, Director Kantosh. The only concern is when you start emailing that to a quorum of the board, or if the person that you do send it to sends it to another member, and therefore creating what is called a serial meeting. So these types of communications are not disallowed, but they can become an issue if it is shared with a quorum of the governing board, and deliberations or a consensus is developed in the sharing of that information. So that would be my only caution there. The Brown Act in section 54592, 952.2 is very clear on this. And so I can speak more specifically to it if you have more specific information. But what you're sharing with me is not disallowed so long as it doesn't go beyond the two of you.
This is what we live with on the planning commission as well. Communications, ex parte communications are allowed, but they must be disclosed if they're relevant to something that the board, in this case, the commission,
Got copies of it here.
is
today.
dealing with.
Copies of what I
Yes.
sent Director Stone with me today, and I was gonna distribute those when we talk about it today. My intention was
There
to,
won't be a quorum of the board, but it's more than a quorum of this committee. So
am I allowed, not allowed, if I bring something to a committee meeting and just hand it to you guys, am I allowed to do that at a committee meeting?
Yes, you are. You are allowed to do that, Director Kentosh, and to have copies for staff as well. That will be part of the administrative record for any decisions or recommendations that come out of this committee.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I want to say that associate in our firm, Emily White, will be taking over at this point in time. Unfortunately, I have a meeting that is scheduled right around now in another Zoom meeting, so I will be signing off at this point in time. Any questions that you have, I think I'm just going to ask Ms. White to just take down those questions, listen carefully, but we're not, as a legal office, prepared to answer, these in-depth questions at this point in time. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Robert. This kind of exercise kind of makes my point that the questions about the questionnaire or the survey that we've been talking about could be subject to delays and a lot of dialogue and discussion. So I think we should start with that today. That'd be okay with you. I prepared it.
There are several topics that are personnel related, and it doesn't matter to me which order we do them in. So you have something to give us and give staff.
Prepared, I emailed Allison with a discussion of the meeting and my availability. I asked her if she could leave it, the wording for the agenda general enough that we can all make introductory statements if we wanted to. So I don't want to be the only one. I want to make sure you guys have an opportunity to make introductory statements as well. I'm prepared to introduce the topic.
The topic being the survey.
The survey and the reasons behind it.
Okay.
All right. Emily, let me know if I misspeak, okay? Okay.
Emily, she's on mute.
I will let you know. Thank you very much. And actually, I do apologize only because I don't know what all of you look like. And previously with Robert there, the screen was really small. Could I quickly just identify who everybody is? I'm so sorry.
Quite all right. Jeff Palmer. Yeah. Can you see the
I
the
can-
board?
Yes, I can see everyone from the blue shirt all the way over to the gentleman in the
Shirt
looks
is
like a
Jeff
light blue
Palmer,
shirt.
General Manager.
Thank
And
you.
Allison Young, Administrative Officer, Chief Administrative Officer. Jan Steenberg, who is our IT head. Willisey. Stone, Kentosh. We have two members of staff here that are not on camera.
Okay, thank you very much. That was incredibly helpful. I appreciate it.
I was just out of curiosity, who else is attending the meeting? Do we know? Are they anonymous?
Travell is on, Lynn is on, and Travis is on,
And then
and then an unknown.
Thought that phone number was from Robert's office.
it might be Rick. It might be Rick's
Oh.
number.
059 something is an Oxnard
No,
number.
that's what I'm talking about.
He said he was going to attend remotely, so.
of somebody else in that building, and it's a 981 exchange. Yeah.
You want a staff report first, or do you just want to start off with board comments?
I'd like to start off with board comments. It's not board comments, it's deliberation. Beginning of deliberations of a process is going to take some time. And there is so much information in your staff report. There's so many levels of detail. The questionnaire can end up getting lost in the noise, lost in the shuffle. So I'd like to start with the questionnaire, if that's okay.
Sure. Let's start then with the staff report and questionnaire. We'll take it to board comments.
Okay, that's fair.
So in the staff report, there's a section on the employee satisfaction survey. We haven't put together a list of questions. I think Allison received one sample question list, but there's obviously lots of questions that can be put on a survey. There's lots of text that you can put in each one of those questions. There's obviously at some point some discussion on how you want to put the survey out to employees, how you want to get those results, how you want to review those results, how you want to sort of collate and do all that. Really, we were thinking that the first step would be to gather some questions. If you had some, we can put together some. My thought was we would also go to Liebert Cassidy and say, do you have some sample questions that would be appropriate for consideration by the board? My thought is we'd take all those questions from all the different sources, put them on a big list, and then say, you know, which ones do you want to include? Are there duplicates? Are there different ways to say same questions? And then we could get the, once we decide on the list of questions and the process, go ahead and get that out and back and reviewed. So we're open to your suggestions on process and obviously your suggestion on questions and whether or not you think it would be valuable to pull some questions from some subject matter experts like Liebert Cassidy, as well as anybody else that would be appropriate for consideration. That was sort of the very general, start with questions, start with process, and go from there.
Jim?
Okay, I'd like to, and my memory isn't what it used to be, so my mind goes blank every now and then for a few seconds. So I've written some notes to myself.
Pause, we'll wait.
You may have to wait for a while. No, I'm just kidding. I would like to start with what I think the question is as to why we're here today. What drove this meeting? First of all, I'd like to just say that I think that Ohio Valley Sanitary District is a great place to work and still a great place to work and has been a great place to work. I think it was October, Director Stone suggested that we do a job satisfaction survey. I think those are always good ideas because it helps us keep the finger on the pulse of what's going on in the field. And we had a director at Miners Oaks Water District, Mike Krumschmidt, who was he was a school teacher. And the school teachers and college professors get rated by their students. And he says, how come your general manager never gets rated by the people that work for him? So I'm used to the idea of kind of rating ourselves. And a job satisfaction survey is a good way of doing that. What do we call it, a job satisfaction survey? If you had another word for it, an expectation survey or something like that, whatever you call it, it's the same thing. But since October, little has happened. The November board meeting was a huge surprise to me. We had a big group of people standing out front. I am really embarrassed to admit I didn't know who they were. I mean, I'm a director for a water district and I hardly know any of the operations staff at all. And I thought, well, maybe somebody's getting a safety award or maybe somebody's retired and they're getting honored. Or maybe they're all here for the ADU hearing we had that day. So big crowd of people. I was embarrassed that I need to get out more, basically. So a few of the employees and retirees spoke about their concerns. Liz spoke well. Even Jan spoke. That was a surprise to me. So after 30 years of involvement with public agencies and public board meetings, that was one of the most memorable board meetings I've ever been to. I'll never forget that. I mean, to have this crowd of people come up and they're concerned about something. speak like that. So we can't just pretend it didn't happen. I'm afraid if we bury it at the end of a very busy agenda, we're going to forget that it happened. So I don't fully understand, even though I've talked to people and asked around, I don't fully understand what is going on. Puzzle pieces don't all fit to me. First of all, we have a grievance procedure. As far as I know, nobody's filled out a grievance. I'm on the ordinance committee and we're making a bunch of changes to the ordinances that might affect employees, but we were very concerned not to punish anybody or take anybody's benefits away. And I didn't see anything on that list of changes that was enough to cause a mini revolt or cause that level of concern amongst our staff. Now, maybe I didn't read them carefully enough, or I wasn't aware of the consequences of some of those changes. But I didn't see that was that big of a deal. Talked to a couple of retirees, and then one of them spoke at the meeting in November. I don't fully understand the minutia of their concerns about some kind of interpretation of payments and that sort of thing. I'd have to read the original text of the law. I have to study more than I have. It's really unclear to me what they're concerned about something. I'm not sure what it is. Right. And there was a retiree, forget his name, I'm embarrassed to admit, but he spoke about a year ago here. And he had some general complaints, which I didn't fully understand the context of them. And one of the comments he made was he was surprised that he didn't receive an exit interview. I don't remember his name or what his complaints were, but that's kind of the first glimmer I heard of some complaints. Now, a couple of days after the November meeting, I dropped by the office here. And the first time I ever come to the office unannounced, just wanted to wander around and see who's here. Jeff was here. I talked to Jeff. While I was talking to Jeff, Austin came by with some checks for him to sign. And Jeff told me kind of offhandedly that there were $8,000 make up for some changes, which I didn't quite understand in the policy or interpretations of the policy. And he said, this should take care of the problems that we have with those people. And as far as I recall, there was no report to the board on any of this. So if we had a problem, we solved it, and now the problem's gone away, well, I would expect the general manager to report to us exactly what happened. I haven't heard anything about that since. Today I reread two memorandums that kind of discuss this topic. I read the November board meeting agenda packet. It was on page 354 of 405 pages of part 2. That was like an 800-page document. I had to find it. But I read through and then there's also the report on today's, or the staff report on today's committee meeting. And it doesn't seem to be concerned about anything. Because people don't like change. Some the generalizations like people don't like change. We must treat the customers the same. Possible regulatory issues. Talked a lot about the classification compensation organization study, which I think is a great thing to do that study. But all these two memorandums, what I've heard today, is that we're kind of somewhat in denial that there might be a problem that we don't understand. I'm befuddled about what's going on. Don't understand it. And it seems like we have some kind of a problem that we have to resolve. We need to listen to our staff. So there's a little background information I'd like us to at least consider. First of all, I want to just say I have complete confidence in our general manager. He makes it easy being a director because he takes care of everything. And when you read the board package, you read all the information, you see the things that they've done with the plant upgrade and the FEMA projects, and the washouts last winter. He's an outstanding, in my opinion, he's an outstanding general manager. He's also may be the kind of guy that when he needs help, he won't ask for it. And sometimes also when I've had disagreements with Jeff, Jeff's usually right, so it's kind of hard to disagree with him. But when you disagree with Jeff, here comes a steamroller and you end up a quarter inch thick. So, just wonder if Jeff doesn't give us some help somewhat with this issue that we're dealing with. Oh, the other issue we need to consider is confidentiality. I've been involved in these kind of things in the past. I'm starting to lose my voice. Losing it for years. Confidentiality is essential. I've had problems in the past when I've dealt with employee issues and I've told the wrong person that I thought to keep it confidential. And they didn't. And so whatever, and so I'm a little nervous, to be honest. I'm sitting here at a board meeting and I got an attorney grilling me about people I've talked to. And, I mean, maybe he has to do that, but that's going to intimidate not only the staff who may hear what's going on here today, it's going to intimidate me too. I better be careful. The attorney's going to grill me. So you have to be very concerned about confidentiality and make sure that our staff during this process of doing a survey know that their confidentiality is protected. You know, we're going to, through this process, we're going to have questions about the Brown Act. And like, for instance, can we interview staff? Obviously, we're going to get support from the Brown Act, from Robert and the other firm. So the other thing we need to be very aware of is that on a societal basis, our society is having trouble keeping people, companies in Ventura County are having trouble keeping staff fully staffed because the price of housing is so high. And a lot of people are retiring. The boomers are almost all gone now, the workforce. The other problem we have is a lot of younger people nowadays spend so much time on their phone, they don't know how to work with their hands. They don't take things apart and put back together again anymore. And we need those kind of people. So we have to make sure that we keep Ojai Valley Sanitary District a very good place to work. And the last item I want to just mention, but in passing, that we need to keep in mind is that we're not a union shop. And I worked with unions before. I worked with SEIU. You can work with them. It's kind of it can be a distraction, can take a lot of time. And I believe that we should be doing a good job for our employees so that they don't need a union. So I've prepared a separate discussion here on where we go from here, but I wanted to just say that's where I see things sitting right now.
In touch. Yeah. I've got a couple of notes I jotted down here. Just the important part about the employee survey is a lot of it is my own selfishness when it comes time to do the general manager's evaluations. Those are very generic.
Questions in
We don't-
evaluation, you mean?
Yes, and we don't often get maybe a lot of input from reports or a lot of input from operations people. The survey, the way I would envision this working, maybe I should turn this around. The way I envision this survey working is first we get this first initial survey out. Determine where maybe our weak spots are at, the problems that we're having. And then I would see this going forward as a living document every year. Maybe go out around August or July or August. So we've got some background on just how things are really operating inside and not just what we see from coming to this meetings or seeing passing. That's what I envision with this. I guess the thing that's been one of the things that's driven me to suggest this for a long time. The other thing is just seeing some of the, if it's dissatisfaction or just security on things things that are going to happen. I think people need to have a chance to voice those concerns. They need to have a chance to do that without any fear of repercussions or coming back on it. I think this is a great way for the board to get a look at maybe what we need to do, also what staff needs to do. And I guess my last point to this is kind of something that I'm wondering if everybody all the time getting the same message. Are the people getting a message from one person and part of it from another? Are we doing it at two different times so they're not, maybe not getting exactly the same? That's just kind of some of my things that I can think of. Start. Okay.
I have just a few comments at this point. With regard to, not to misrepresent anything, but intimidated directors. State law, the Brown Act, is very clear. The public's business must be done in public. And as an analogy, directors sit as a jury. We're a legislative body, but we're also a quasi-judicial body. And if you've served on a jury, and I'm sure all of us have, you are told by the judge you are supposed to base your decisions on the evidence and the testimony that's presented in court, nothing else. You're not allowed to go research things and come to different conclusions unless everyone knows that you have researched those things. That's the point of revealing ex parte contacts. It's not that they're not allowed, it's just that they must be reported so that public in general, as well as the rest of the board, understands the basis for which you as a director have come to one or another of your conclusions, or at least that you have heard another side of things if it's not already presented in a board meeting or a committee meeting, then that's why it should be revealed. As far as the satisfaction survey, I think that it is critical. I'm a little concerned these days in academia where professors' tenure decisions may be based on them getting graded by their students, and students who don't get the grades they like downgrade the professors, and the professors don't get promotions or tenure or whatever. That bothers me a lot. On the other hand, I think the opinions of students in academia or the staff here at OVSD are of critical importance to understanding the entire tenor of how things are going here. And so I think it is critical that we have this survey. I think it would be very useful to have exit interviews, just like we have incoming interviews when people are considered or hired to specific slots on staff. And so that I think is also very critical. Once someone is separated from the organization, there's no more repercussions because they're already gone. That exit interview would be very helpful. There was one more and I didn't write it down, but I'll come back to it. Those are my thoughts at the moment. I share your applause for for our general manager. I heard very few complaints, any. So I want to continue to work with him. I think he's outstanding. And I think we just need to know more opinions in order for us to come to conclusions that we need to as board members. I think it would be useful as well. I remember that third point. Would be useful if there be at least a question or two, an employee satisfaction survey that relates to the board of directors. Because it's way too easy for a board of directors to be completely aloof from anything except the top executives of the organization. And if there is a feeling among the staff that the board of directors is aloof or uncaring or whatever pejorative term you might choose, I think we need to know that. And if there are ways that we can do a better job for the organization as a whole, then we ought to hear that. And that's all I have to say on the subject. So.
Okay, I've prepared some thoughts of where we could go from here. If you'd like to hear them.
You had some paper you were going to share.
I have one for the management team. I'm running out of paper.
That's okay. I just need one for the administrative record.
This was a job satisfaction survey that I did. And I worked for United Water Conservation in April of 2002. It's been in the public record, except the public record one, we gave it to the board directly. The number of votes in each category all marked on it, so we knew what the results of the poll were. I was kind of proud of this. You guys want to hear a little story about where this came from, or should I?
United is United what?
United Water Conservation District, so public agency, special district. We used to be headquartered in Santa Paula. Now it's in Oxnard, headquartered in Oxnard, but a pretty good sized public agency. Worked for them for nearly 20 years. I retired from them in 2011. I believe it's been that long. And we had an issue where, I'll just give you the brief background of the history because it might be interesting. We had a situation where I was manager of operations and maintenance, and I knew what was going on. And I knew there was a morale problem because there was one particular individual that would complain a lot. It kind of spread out from there. But then people would hear from the complainers, and then the general manager came to me and said, "Jim, something's going on in O&M. Morale is bad. We need to figure it out." So I did this survey, sent it out, and what I found was that most of the staff thought that their own morale was good. Asked them, "What's the morale of the district as a whole?" "Oh, it's bad. It's really bad. My own morale is high, but morale around me is bad." So it kind of showed us that one or two belly acres, but overall things were doing pretty good. But we ended up making some changes and improving our safety program and doing a bunch of other stuff. The general manager, I applied the survey only to my own department, and general manager liked it so much that she did it for the whole organization. Everybody filled out the job satisfaction survey. But what we found out was that the O&M guys are the happiest of all. So anyway, where we can go from here is, I think, when you have a situation like this, where there is some unknown problems and there's potential for people being nervous, I think the boards should be directly involved in this process. Because if we have management do it, I don't know if management is perceived as the problem or there's other problems, whatever the problems are. But I think we as a board need to take an active role in this. So I would volunteer. I'm just going to offer this. I will not be one bit offended if you guys decline. I I would offer to prepare using this as a template, prepare a draft job satisfaction survey that would be focused on, this is directly what it was for United Water. But I would offer to revise it for our particular circumstances. Talk to Jeff, Allison, and maybe Jan as well, and other folks. Get input from everybody. Bring it to a committee. Discuss it at committee. Eventually go to a board approval, kind of follow it through. And then I think it should be accompanied by a memorandum from the board to staff explaining what's going on. Because they're going to be getting the survey, and some of them have been to the meeting and sat there, but some of them didn't go. They've heard firsthand what's going on.
Spoke and some didn't, yeah.
And then we just basically say, here's a memorandum from the board. The memorandum would explain why we're doing the survey, what the results will be used for. Give them assurances there won't be any retribution for anyone who fills out the survey, how they feel like it. And of course, we'll need to have a legal review that. Have a press a legal review, make sure the survey is okay before we send it out. And that's my suggestion, my offer, but the offer expires in 5 minutes.
No pressure.
I think it's fine. You want to begin to develop sample. I think the committee here will have to go through it. We'll have to take it to the whole board. We'll have to get legal review, obviously. I can think of a couple of things that I would add to this already. One has
The board.
yes, question about the board. The board attitude, involvement, perceived attitude, obviously. Also, you have job satisfaction, fine, all of that. Are you appreciated? There's the usual detailed harassment kinds of things. And a mention of the safety program. There is also, I think, it would be useful to talk about the district's training program. Does it prepare you to do your job? Or do you feel that you are remaining as certifiable as you should be? Example. And old age. Oh, and do you feel that the district has provided you with the tools that you need to do the job you perceive you are assigned to do? That could be IT, it could be procedures, whatever. So the board attitude and involvement, training and tools, I think, my opinion, are worthy additions to a good start on a satisfaction survey.
You want Liebert Cassidy to provide you any
I'd
questions?
love to see some other samples as well. Yes.
And you'd be allowed to email us samples.
Well, I think the way I would structure some of the Brown Act and some of the dissemination, one of the things that helps solve that is if you have ideas and you give them to Allison and you say, hey, here's a sample I got, wherever it comes from. If we then take that sample and put all the samples together and send them out to the whole committee or board, then we've complied with the Brown Act and the dissemination, in that there's no sort of thought that people are triangulating conversations outside. If we had 5 examples and we put them all together and said, here's 5 examples for your consideration, and everybody gets the same 5 from the same source at the same time, and then in a committee meeting like this, you say, I like question number 1 on the first one and question number 3 on the fourth one. Now the whole dissemination and deliberation process is transparent and uniform. And so that would be my suggestion is if you have samples, if we go to Liebert Cassidy and say, do you have some samples? I would take those as is and then send them out to all of you and say, here's 3 samples from Liebert Cassidy and a sample from Jim's provided from United and you know, here's the package. And that way the dissemination is not sort of outside the boundary of the committee or the board, and that you're all looking at the same thing at the same time. So, you know, there's no question over how you got it, who got what, who said something when they gave it to somebody else. It's all, here's the package for your consideration. So I would sort of fall back on that sort of more transparent, uniform process to then start the conversation. And the form and format can be whatever you want, and the questions can be whatever you want, and the deliberation can all be at the same time. And then it's cleaner, it's transparent, and it's more uniform. So if you, I mean, when we get to sort of the survey portion of this discussion here first, is if you have others, even if you have them after this meeting, you know, and we can say, hey, we received these. They didn't go amongst you. They came to Allison as the clerk of the board. She could say, here's the 5 I got from these 5 people, and here they are for your consideration. So
They're considered in a public meeting.
and then they're considered in a public meeting, and the rewording of the questions is in a public meeting, and all of it's sort of very out there for everybody to see, that it wasn't unbiased and it wasn't unfair and it wasn't sort of skewed one way or the other by, you know, any source or conversation. So if you have one, great, we'd love to see it and put it in the package. We'll contact Liebert Cassidy and say, hey, do you have some samples from some of your other clients that you can use to be examples or samples to start the conversation? And then whether it's 5 questions or 10 or these 5 and those 5, it completely occurs in the committee, you know, in
Public view.
in public view, which I think it's important that the dissemination of whatever information and the deliberation occurs at the same time, in the same way, in the public view. And I think those are sort of the critical tenets of the Brown Act and anything that we would do. And so, however, that's a,
Deliberations and decisions have to be made in public, and the basis on which you make them,
right.
the information that you work with, has to be made public. And I would add to what you said in the package. I think that's critical.
Yeah, I think,
We have all these surveys that we get to deliberate on or consider as we put our own together. Public should see them.
well, and that becomes a sequential sort of administrative record. The committee met, some information was discussed, and then the sources were all gathered, and then all of that flows back out on this date to all these people, and that agenda and that package and all those attachments, they're all on our website for anybody to see, download, use, you know, however. I think it's critical that we can meet as often as we need to. We don't have to only meet monthly. You know, one of the comments I made in the staff report overall was, I think we can set up a regular schedule and fast track some discussions. So we don't have to take this, wait till February, do something in March, you know, delays and so forth. This can happen fairly quickly. But I think we have to make sure that it follows sort of disclosed steps.
I have a green light from you guys, so go ahead and start proceeding then.
Sure.
I'll incorporate your
and-
comments, and I'll work with you guys, and they can remind me as to what I'm supposed to do and not do.
Just when you're in a public meeting, you have to disclose basis that you're commenting from, deliberating from, or voting from. So that the public knows how the public business is being conducted. Very simple. The language gets long, but the disclosures are pretty straightforward. We do this at every Ojai Planning Commission meeting, because we have we have cases that deal with specific parcels or with policies or with changes to the municipal code or whatever. And we need to disclose how have I been influenced or potentially influenced by something public won't know unless I say it. That's all it's about. Okay. Now, as far as the survey, I read through some of these things here. We will talk in great detail about FMLA and all the nuances and leave and bereavement leave and stuff like that. Those were topics that we heard at the November meeting that I remember them being among the topics that I was contacted about. And I think in part, we need to understand what are the current, just for our own edification to make sure that we're keeping the employee handbook where it should be. We need to understand from legal what are the black letter law restrictions on what we can do and can't do, and what legal room the district and the board as overseers of the district have in terms of an ability to adjust any numbers or anything else happens to be in the state law. A lot of dealing from planning commission, state law, and particularly with ADUs and stuff that we all hear a lot about right now. State law keeps changing and it keeps taking discretion away from local jurisdictions. So there's more and more things that we as planning commissioners are not allowed to consider or do anything about or make any decisions on because state law is preempted at all. In most cases, what happens is local jurisdiction, whether it's the city or the county or in this case, the planning commission advising the city council, we can make some things more restrictive than the state law. That's specifically allowed in parts of the state law. There are other places where we are not allowed to make things more restrictive. ADUs is one of those. We can grant more leeway to a local parcel owner in regard to ADUs than the state does, but not less. One example. And I think we need to understand with FMLA for sure, with bereavement leave for sure, any other parts of the state law that wind up directly affecting staff or even retirees, because there's state law applies to what retirees do and don't get to do or are allowed to have or not have. I think we need to understand where our swim lane is, where it isn't, so that as we ask questions and as we make decisions on the employee handbook, for example, that we're on the right side of the law and we're not overstepping our bounds. We also understand what flexibility we have with regard to any of these topics. So that there are places where we can be more generous if we choose to, that we understand where those places are, where they are.
We're always going to be subject to legal review. We do.
Right.
Got to make sure that we.
I think a primer on a couple of things from legal would be useful to us as we begin our thoughts about what might be done in these areas.
Steve, if I could.
Yeah.
Maybe I should give an overview for where we are. So as I understand it on employee survey. Jim, you're going to put together some questions. You're going to modify some things. We're going to go to Lieber Cassidy, get some questions. If any of the rest of you have sample surveys, and pull all those in, we'll just put them together in a package. We can meet as often as we need to and say, okay, here's the overall list of questions, and we'll start there. And so I think we can do that pretty quickly, dependent upon, I mean, we can meet weekly if we have to. It's no problem to gather information and circle back on these things. So if that's okay on that, I'd like to kind of talk about the rest of where we are, because I think there are some questions about the survey that are going to be answered by the other two pieces. There are some questions that have been raised that are directly related to some of the outcome potentials in the handbook and in the class and comp study. And so I think there's some connective parts to all of these three pieces. We have a list of questions, written questions, that we have sent to Lieber Cassidy to help frame some of these exact issues. So it's not.
These questions that you had or staff have asked?
Staff have had, you've had, we've had, everybody's had. Bereavement leave, what is it? How is it? What is state law? What does it require? Where do we have flexibility? So we took that question and all of the related issues, and we're going to send them to Lieber Cassidy. These aren't Jeff's opinion. These are coming from Lieber Cassidy. So when we want to have a discussion about what does it mean when we say this is an exact replication of the law. Now, some of these things, like Steve, you said, are black and white in the law. Thou shalt do this. Other things have not been specifically tested by the law or written specifically in the law. And so they're based on the lawyer's sort of interpretation of where various cases are. We want Lieber Cassidy to provide that when it's not exact, but hey, here's our thoughts on this topic based on all of these other factors. And I think that's important to have for the discussion. Here's the black and white issue on this one. This one's less black and white, but here's where we see the sort of law going in this arena. We want all those questions to be answered directly by Lieber Cassidy so that they're the experts, they're the subject matter experts in how all these things work. So I have a 4-page list of questions. It's off of small print. I've sent it off to them, said, hey, how does this work? Now, many of these issues, we've already had conversations with them about that have helped us craft some of our thoughts on where things are. But you know what? We're going to take a step back and say, provide us a specific written answer on this topic. So those are forthcoming. A couple of things. A year ago, we started a class and comp study. And I think it had several goals. One was to figure out what our organizational chart should look like for the next now and the next 10 or 15 years. How do we structure? Second part was, do we have a job description for every position here at the district? And does it accurately describe what the person does, what the qualifications they're required to have, what minimum certifications and experience they have? And how does that then compare to other agencies? So when we compare two positions, does our treatment plan operator to do the same thing, the same way, in the same sort of concept as a treatment plan operator to at any other organization? The third part was then to go out and say, okay, now that we've matched up our job descriptions, how does salaries and compensation match? Are we paying our people the same? Do we have the same level of benefits? What are all those benefits? And then we put all that through discussions here at the committee and here at the board and decide where to adjust it. Compensation is not just compensation. There's base pay. CalPERS uses base pay to figure out retirements, but there's a whole list of things, and I listed a few of them. We just got last Tuesday, the day after our board meeting, last Tuesday, the results of that compensation study results. And everything is listed on a table. For instance, base pay, medical pay, dental, vision, there's probably 12 or 15 little tables, and it lists what we provide, and then it lists all the other agencies and what they provide. And so you can comparatively see this agency does this agency does that. One of the simple examples is holidays. How many specified holidays does the district have? We happen to have 10, and we provide an additional 2 days for floating holidays. So now you can look at that list and compare it to every other agency we compared it to and see, does the 10+2 match somebody else's numbers? We find that on all the benefits, we're in the top tier of all our comparables. We're not the highest, but we're above average and we're well into the top third on almost every benefit. Now, there were a couple of things which are interesting and are good conversations to have. And I think they're really valuable conversations to have. There's some agencies that provide things that we do not. We found that out through this survey. So we found how we compared to everybody else, and we found where we didn't have something that somebody else had. And should we consider that? And if we do, what's an appropriate level of benefit to provide? And what is a legal level of benefit to provide? There's no legal benefit that requires federal holidays. Now, the post office does. We don't operate like them. But you can look down the list and see that our 10+2 compares to somebody else's 11 and somebody else's 12 and somebody else's 14. The average, just in rough terms, is we have 12 days and the average is somewhere between 11 and 14, as you look down the list to compare. Not all of those are holidays. Some of them are floaters. Should we have Cesar Chavez Day or should we provide a floater? So we have those sorts of decisions that we're going to come back to the board and say, here's this topic. Here is base pay. Here is sick pay. Here is vacation days. Here is standby pay. Here is overtime. Here is all sorts of things. And we're going to go through those very detailed and get down in the weeds and see who are we, what do we provide, and how does everybody else provide. Those are all wonderfully showing the information. We just got that last Tuesday. I think it's good news. Our pay is good, but it's not perfect for every position. We have a couple of positions that are on the upper end of the scale, very high on the end of the scale, and we have a couple of positions that are less than meeting the market. But we can have those conversations based on the comparables and making sure that we're in tune with what we pay and what everybody else pays. This is hugely important for attracting employees and then retaining employees. One of the things we found out is what you call bandwidth, and I'm now getting down in the weeds, but and we'll have more very specific conversations with some specific numbers, but bandwidth is the range from the low to the high that a position pays. And we have a 5-step process, A through E. And those are very defined steps. We found that our bandwidth was narrower than a lot of people we compared ourselves to. So if just in raw terms, they had a lower low and a higher high than we had in our bandwidth. And so the question is, what should we do about that? And we got some recommendations
With adjacent category.
Right. And so we've gotten some recommendations from our class and comp study on to say, hey, maybe you should bump out a little bit, and here's some thoughts on the difference between each step in that range. So rather than having A through E, we would have through G, F and G added to the list and the numbers. We'll get way down into the weeds on that, but we just got that Tuesday. But overall, our pay is good and our benefits are good. Not perfect, and there's some areas to have some conversations. I would suggest we start with kind of the org chart. Hey, what do we look like? Does it make sense, the structure that we're talking about? Then we look at the job descriptions and say, hey, here's the job descriptions that match that org chart. And then we start, once we've sort of gotten our arms around, do we have the right org chart? Do we have the right job descriptions? Now we can then compare those job descriptions to other agencies and start looking through the benefits and finding out where and how you'd like to make adjustments and where we have room to make adjustments. But we have real data to work with, and it's based on real facts from across the spectrum. Now for comparables, what we did is we did a couple of things, and we've done this in the past. We've compared ourselves to other like size agencies because there's some synergy over the jobs we do and the jobs somebody else does as a small agency versus a large agency. I like to say we have 21 employees, but there's 50 hats because there's lots of things to do. And so when you compare yourselves to another small agency, you get that similar job, sort of people handling lots of different things. When you go to a large agency, they'll have a whole department of people that do just one thing. And so it's hard to make the true comparison. But you can't ignore those differences because there aren't a lot of agencies like us, our size, our complexity, our requirements around here. And so there's this balance between looking for people and agencies that are our same size and shape and comparing ourselves to local agencies where there is a direct correlation between employees moving across the spectrum. There are many employees that we have today that have come from one or two other local agencies, in their careers. So we have to be mindful of both the comparison to like-sized and the comparison to adjacent places that have the same sort of economics. So, we have cost of living. So we'll have those deep conversations. The second piece of the discussion is the personnel handbook. Now, personnel handbook is over 100 pages long, and it's basically the document that governs everything that I indicated in the staff report. There's a section on sick leave. There's a section on vacation days. There's a section on holidays, and all of those are very black and white. You update it from time to time. Now, there's different types of personnel handbooks. There are some that are much shorter than ours and just reference outside codes. And there are some that are longer than ours that actually reprint the codes in entirety into the document. The trade-off, ours is somewhere in the middle. If you just reference it, you don't have to update it frequently because you just say, hey, that law changed. If you include it, well, it's more descriptive, which is great. But now you have to be very, very mindful of the changes frequently. So we have a couple of changes we need to take to our personnel handbook. One, we need to make legal changes. For example, starting July 1st, we now have to, as an agency, it's new state law, started in January, but it's effective July 1st. We have to have a violence in the workplace plan. It's the outside person coming in and causing violence. We have to have a plan. So we have to update our personnel handbook to have this plan in effect, and we have to train our employees on it prior to July 1st. It's a new state law. So that's a very clear example of something that's never been in the handbook before and now needs to be in there in terms of all the requirements of the plan. We also have some sections of our handbook that are a little bit vague. We say one thing one area, we say another thing in a different area. We've had a couple of sections in our review process with outside consultants and experts, and they're coming up with different answers on what it means. Well, if they're coming up with different answers, I'm sure I might, and you might, and an employee might have a different answer of what it means. And we need to clean those up. It's just fair that when we say something, we all know what it says, and we mean what it says, and it's clear. And then as we go through the class and comp study and we change some things, we're going to need to go back to the personnel handbook and change some things. Right now, under our overtime rules, we have a certain set of policies and practices. And one of the things I think that is open for consideration in this process is changing them. I think we need to be a little bit more generous on our overtime because of how our employees work. There are demands on their time that it's not occasional overtime. You work 8 hours and you work an extra half an hour or something here or there. We have some structures because we operate 24/7 that we're requiring basically on a regular basis people to be working in an overtime role. And I think it's important that we're more generous, or at least talk about options to expand those definitions of overtime to be more appropriate with the way people are working. One of the questions that also came up, and we need to dig into this is one of these questions, is how the double time over 12 works. We don't have that now. But we have some circumstances where we do get into a situation where people work over 12 hours. Storm response, certain other situations where people are working over 12, and should they get double time, that's appropriate. That's standard in many other industries. It's not in ours. We need to think about it. One of the complicating factors, and we think we're through most of the discussion, is our collection system operators who drive the big trucks are subject to DOT rules. And so there are some federal highway standard rules about our truck drivers could be considered under the same rules as the long haul truckers. Now, we think we've solved it, that there's an interstate set of rules and an intrastate set of rules. And so we think we can, accommodate the 12-hour shift. We have to do a better job accounting for the time so that one of our operators doesn't get put in a position of working 12, going home and resting for an hour, getting called back on an emergency, and putting in more hours that may extend them into one of these DOT categories that causes a problem. But that's an example in the personnel handbook where we need to articulate exactly how we do that. We don't even have that in our personnel handbook today because we've never envisioned someone working over 12 and being subject to these rules. And we need to include that. And so I think there are some situations where the benefit discussion and the personnel handbook get melded together in this, make it legal, get rid of the vagueness and the inconsistency, and make sure that it all matches. And so that's the process we need to go through. So to accomplish those, we've laid out at least a concept. On the class and comp, here's the steps we would go through. Start with the org chart, then the job descriptions, then the benefits. Same thing on the personnel committee. We're going to take a step back on the personnel handbook. Maybe we got ahead of ourselves and had some text changes and things got sideways. We're going to take a step back. First of all, tomorrow, all staff is going to be in this room and we're going to go through the personnel handbook and talk about the topics and the chapters. What's in it? Make sure everybody gets a clean, current version of the personnel handbook. Here's what's in it. We're not going to get way down in the weeds, but we're going to start the dialogue over what's in it. The second step is we're going to take the handbook and we're going to put notes, call them stickies, in the sections we need to change and why. We're not going to talk about the words on what we're going to change, but we need to change this section because of this. We need to change this section because of this. We need to add a section on violence in the workplace. We need to, expand our discussion in overtime to deal with some of the nuances in time and a half and double time. And so we're just going to thematically put in where we're going to change things. We'll bring that back to you and say, hey, here's our list of the lawyers saying what we need to change and what we know about the things we need to change. And just go through the chapters rather than trying to read the words and the additions and subtractions and track changes. Let's talk thematically about what needs to change and why. Just have that 30,000 foot level sort of discussion about what needs to change and why. So we're going to have the meeting with all staff tomorrow. I'd love to hear everybody's comments. And we're going to start on both of these at sort of the introductory step of bringing them back to you and saying, okay, here's the handbook and the thematic changes. Here's the org chart on the comp study side. At each step, get questions answered by the subject matter experts so we know what exactly we're going to do and how we got to the conclusions we got to. Now, as a sort of a pre-list, last week, there was a lot happening. We had the board meeting Monday. Tuesday, we got the class and comp study. We knew we wanted to set this meeting quickly. I went out and sent out an email to some staff and said, hey, do you have any ideas? Would you like to talk before this meeting? Any quick ideas? Just sort of opening the door to the conversation. I got late last week a list of 11 items that staff would like to talk about. So we'll save those for the benefit discussion when we get to those topics. But I have a list here. I didn't want to get into the weeds on each one of those items, but it was put together by a group of staff. So it's sort of a first list of things. Some of them we know about. They've already been conversations. Some of them are new benefits they would like to consider. Some of them are changes to current benefits that they'd like us to consider. So there's a list, but we'll keep that. Didn't want to share it because it was sort of not in the package and not disclosed. It's definitely a list of 11 things that we're going to track. So that's where we are. I would propose that that for each of the three pieces, for the class and comp, for the personnel handbook, and for the survey, that we meet as frequently as we can, and that we start chewing away at some of these topics one little piece at a time. And at each section, we get the appropriate subject matter expertise from Lieber Cassidy on the topic. You know, as I indicated in the staff report, we've asked them specifically, when are we supposed to pay overtime under today's rules? Can we be more generous?
Allowed to.
Where we're allowed to, and under what circumstances? And if they say, here's the floor, here's what you're required to do, and if you want to do more, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, those are at your discretion, then we can discuss which you want to include, but then we would need to take those sort of new sort of standards, practices, rules, and put them back into the personnel handbook and say, okay, we're going to go to this additional step of overtime discussion. Here's where it's described. But we need to kind of get from them what we can do, what we would like to do, and then we can start to marry these two together. I think it's a bunch of little chunks, and we take them in bite sizes, and we put them together in packages that we would like to finish off. And when it's appropriate in conversations with the committee, then we can go get the full board's discussion on that topic, and just work through them as quickly as we can. I'm not looking at this, we're going to get through this in a meeting or two, but I think we need to keep at it as frequently as we can, because there's a lot of little chunks and a lot of little packages, and we got to go through this process of deliberation, get to the board deliberation, answer questions, and then get things sort of adopted. So that's where we are. I think we wanted to just start with little things and start down the process and go as quickly as we can through all of that.
On your list of 11 topics, phrase I'm sure we've all heard at one time or another was a sensitivity analysis. Are there some of those 11 topics that are pain points for staff at this point? Are there others that are annoying? Are there others that are, wouldn't it be nice, but I don't walk away if I don't get it?
I've started some conversations, and I don't want to give you the impression that I know the complete answer to that. One of the things we find in some of these discussions is some of them are important to one or more of the employees in different sort of groups. A couple of them apply to only one group. And so, you know, I'll sit down with every single person and say, where are we? What are your concerns? Where are your fears? What would you like to see? And then we'll put it all back together. There are a couple of topics that are more universal to everybody. And there are a couple of topics that are very, very specific to one or two people. And it spans the whole gamut. And so I don't want to overrepresent, you know, any one or more of them. I think they're all good discussions. I put a couple of them in the staff report, so I'm not saying anything that's unanticipated. But you know, one of the reasons I did this, I suggested we do the comp study, was I wanted to see where other agencies were on a couple of things. One is a longevity study, longevity pay. We try and hire people, try and give them an opportunity to grow, spend their career here. But as soon as they get through that bandwidth and they get to step E currently, you know, as soon as somebody goes, whatever they are, and they get to a step E, no more steps for them unless they get promoted or they get COLAs, cost of living. And so one of the tools that some agencies are providing is a discussion about a longevity bonus. After 5 years, you get a little, and 7 years, and 10 years, and 15 years. And there's a number of different steps that other agencies are doing. But it allows for a way to say, hey, you've topped out in your current position, but there's some value to you being here long-term beyond just the step you're in. And it's all that extra knowledge that you gain and bring to the district that was of value. I think longevity pay makes sense for us to talk about, consider, because we do have some limitations on, people being promoted up. And so I think longevity pay is a good question. And I think we got some data on it. One of the second pieces of the discussion is a 457 deferred comp matching program. Some things have happened in the past 5 or 6 years, maybe a little bit more, but they're starting to become very prevalent. And that is, there's a difference between classic PERS employees and PEPRA employees. And because what was happening is we have what's called a 2% at 55. If you retire at 55, you get 2% of your base salary in terms of compensation at PERS. But 2% at 55 isn't the only sort of formula. And we talk about PERS formulas here. And for instance, Santa Barbara has a 2.7 at 55, and other agencies have a 3.0 pension. Yes, pension. Some agencies have 3% at 50. And so there were all these little other formulas being put out there. The reality is PERS was finding that they were not making enough in returns or charging agencies enough for the pension up front to pay those benefits. And it was getting pretty tight on some agencies. And rather than raise costs to the agencies that PERS was going to charge, the state came in and said, we're going to, as of this date, and I think it's January 1st of 2013, everybody that goes into PERS after that date, as their initial date, is what they call a PEPRA employee. And that's Public Employee Pension Protection Act or something. And so it said that there's no more all these other formulas. There's only 2% at 60. 62? 2% at 62. So they pushed out the age of retirement, and they required that employees pick up a share of the cost of funding that retirement. And so
This is a deduction on a page stub.
if somebody gets paid and they get a deduction that goes right to PERS. For classic PERS employees, that's not always the case. And so what happened with PEPRA is PEPRA retirees got to work a lot longer, and there are some limitations on what the maximum pension they can get. From my perspective, as we try to attract employees really want to do a lot for their own sort of planning retirement. That the 457, under section 457 of the retirement IRS code, like a 401k. Well, there's a section called 457 where employees can make a deduction on their paycheck. All our employees can do this. Put it into a 457 plan that grows tax-free. Well,
It's like an IRA.
it's like an IRA, but it's only for public agency employees under section 457. Now there's some 458s and some 457As and Bs, and you get down in the IRS weeds. But the reality is it's a way for employees to plan for their retirement because PEPRA doesn't quite offer quite the upside that a classic PERS does. So
Are you saying that you did not have a 457 plan already?
we already do. But one of the benefits that we found in doing this class and comp study was other agencies were doing a modest or small co-payment to that plan. So if the employee put in $500 a month, then the agency might put in $300 a month or some nominal amount. The goal was to say, hey, the PEPRA kind of pinched the upside of pensions. And if employees wanted to sort of build a nest egg themselves on the 457 side, they could. And agencies were saying, well, maybe we can help out a little bit because of this pinch on the 457. I think it's a good,
Like 401ks.
I think it's a good conversation for us to have. We can decide on the level, we can decide on how, but I think it's a good conversation, both of these issues, longevity pay and 457. So we could have probably a whole meeting this on longevity pay or 457s or, some other things. And so I think we need to start taking some of these benefits in bites and having discussions with you about, hey, here's who we are. Here's what other agencies are doing. Here's maybe some sample levels of sort of an opportunity if you want to consider it. My point is there's lots on the list. My point is that we went out and did a survey specifically to find all of these pieces so we could have, a conversation about how you all wanted to move forward and how you all want to put together things. Now, this list of 11, that's a long story. It's on the list. Different people have different ideas about what is most significant on this list. And I intend to go speak to almost everybody. Say, hey, where are you? What's going on? What are your ideas and thoughts? I've had a few conversations started, and I think it's great. So we'll save the list. We'll go talk to people. We'll bring it back when we get to individual conversations on benefits and bring that for you and say, here's the landscape of the whole topic. But I think the way to get started is to say, hey, let's start at the basic level on both of these, have another meeting and start chewing through some of this discussion. You have questions, staff has questions, we can answer them through the subject matter experts. We can rely on their expertise, not, some source of information. So that's where sort of we are and how I would propose we move forward. There's a lot of questions about the what. I think it's just as important to talk about the how. What do we want to talk about the math, but the how is what's the sequential process and the dialogue that goes along with the what. We'll start tomorrow with staff and we'll continue forward with them. At the same time, we'll bring back another meeting to you probably on a couple of topics to start the dialogue on both the class and comp and the personnel handbook.
And that's perfect. That's what I envisioned when we talked about getting this whole study. That's what we need back first part of the year. Because we've done these before and they've gone absolutely nowhere because it's things that either somebody that doesn't know particular business is put together or something that we kind of concocted or ruined ourselves. And it's never really had any value. I think that this is what we need to do. And I'll take all the time it takes to come sit in these meetings to grind through this stuff, to get a document that's good forever. Till they're outdated again and we can update it. We know where we stand because I really think that the years we haven't been on a fair playing field with other agencies as far as for what we ask. I think it's important.
These two people,
Know where we stand. That's the problem.
the class and comp study looks great. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of comparables. It's good stuff. It's some benefits that we don't provide. We had been thinking about, and we aren't just making up what we're thinking about. Now we actually went out and said, give me the math of this agency and what they do and what they don't do. And then we can have a fair conversation about how you want to implement those. But anything we do on the class and comp side needs to be black and white in the personnel handbook, and they need to match, and the sections in the handbook needs to match where it says it in other places. And then our practices, as we implement them, administratively, we need to follow those practices so that here's the rules, here's what we're offering, here's how we implement it. If there's a question at any point, well, gosh, how does that work? Well, let's stop and ask Lieber Cassidy. Yes, they're lawyers, but they're subject matter experts in the landscape of employee benefits. And like I said, some things are black and white in the law. Thou shalt have a violence in the workplace program. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But then other things, it's kind of like, well, this says this, and this says this, and this says this. And we've had some conversations with them, and they say, well, given the unknowns or the inexactness of some of the legal conditions, we think you're best going in this direction. Okay. Sometimes just advice on which direction to go, being exactly specific is more important than sometimes the black and white. I think we have a great set of questions and a great set of sort of basic studies that we can use, and we'll go forward. And if you're all okay with that, we'll schedule another personnel committee meeting next week, put a couple of the first tier sort of conversations and some questions and answers we've gotten from Lieber Cassidy to deal with those specific sort of first tiers things. You okay with this? Okay, next set up the ladder and just work our way through it.
You fill me in on how this relates to the ordinance committee, because the ordinance committee, we got a whole bunch of changes. We went over those with the ordinance. Are the ordinance committee this?
The ordinance committee is different. The ordinance committee is our rules and regulations as it relates to operations. We do have an ordinance committee meeting that we're going to reschedule as well, where we have to change some language about.
Cover personnel issues at the last ordinance committee meeting, didn't we?
No.
Ordinance is the district's rules and regulations, like, what do you have to do to apply for a permit? Like how many feet away is sewer available? Like those sorts of definitions, not personnel related things.
We did have a personnel handbook that had a whole bunch of actual text changes.
Yeah,
I think it wasn't the right move. We got distracted by the words rather than starting with the themes of why we're changing the code. So we're going to take a step back. We're going to go back to the original code and say, we need to change these 2, 4, 6, 8 sections. And here's why we need to change the sections, but not have all the words that all get, comma and thus this, and it got too much. And I think we'll take a step back and start over. But the good news is I see sort of the class and comp and the personnel committee handbook. It's all good work because we're taking out inconsistencies or explaining things that aren't really explained well enough. So fix that, talk about the benefits, and we'll move forward with each of those presentations. We'll just start at the beginning.
but you can do with staff, so if you get buy-in by staff, that's gonna make our jobs harder.
Well, I think one of the things that happens sometimes, staff, and I may be overstepping here, is there are lots of things that come along in a personnel handbook that someone would like things to be. But everything has to be legal. And so there are lots of things in our handbook that seem like they're too much or too long, or didn't need to say that, or why did you need to explain it that way? Well, because we need to. I mean, we need to specify somewhere, these are our holidays. And it has to be it has to be a chosen day. When it comes to bereavement leave, there was no state standard up until recent. We provided 2 days. That's just what we did. I don't know how we got to the 2 days. It goes way, way, way back in handbook, history. Somewhere along the line, they started with 2 days and they were paid. Now the state law says you have to have at least 5 days unpaid. Okay, we can do more than that, as I've said in the staff report. I think 5 days unpaid. I think unpaid bereavement days are not good. That's not a good idea. So now we're going from 2 paid to 5 unpaid by law. I think the conversation, and I'm not trying to predetermine the finality of it, I think we ought to at least talk about 5 days of unpaid, or I'm sorry, paid.
Question is, does the law allow
Yes.
any days to be paid?
Yes.
It says you must allow at least 5 days,
Unpaid.
and you don't have to make them paid days.
There's a lot of state law that has come about in the last few years where it dealt with employee rights. And a lot of it came out of the whole conversation about gig economy. and gig workers that were sort of working 2 and 3 jobs, you know, a few hours here and a few hours there, and they're a driver for Uber and they're doing this and they're doing that. And
Not enough to have benefits anywhere.
not enough to have benefits anywhere, or a lot of those industries didn't have benefits at all because you were classified as a contract employee. You could work 40 hours in Uber and you were still a contract employee and you didn't get benefits. Well, a lot of these new now laws have come out of that whole effort to say, you know, I don't care if you're an independent trucker or you're an Uber driver or you're a pizza delivery guy or whatever the gig, there's a lot of gig economies and artists and musicians and some of those writers. And a lot of laws where the state came in and said, look, I don't care if you're this or that, you should have this benefit. But most of those benefits were all unpaid. So you have to allow for people to have bereavement leave or sick days. There's up until recently, lots of gig workers or hospitality workers didn't get sick days. Well, now they do. But most of those that come out of the state guidelines are, you don't have to pay. Now we can pay, we're allowed to pay. A lot of companies don't. So we can do 5 bereavement days. We'll open the door. Is 5 enough? Could it be 6? Well, that's your discretion. State law says 5 unpaid. I think we should pay them. And you should ask the question, you know, you should at least as we go through the methodical process, is 5 enough?
Classic legal answer is it depends.
Well, and we're going to run across some things. We're going to run across some of these down in the weeds conversations, and we're going to get that answer. And it depends. And in some cases, we're going to have to pick a path. And then we're going to have to say, you know, if a circumstance has some unique characteristics, then we need to go with the advice of our legal counsel. If they say, well, this doesn't fit your policy, but it's something more, so therefore we recommend you do X. Everything we're going to do from recent and going forward is we're going to make sure that Liebert Cassidy signs off on everything we do. There are some situations when you take into account doctor-patient issues, confidentiality, HIPAA, you know, basic confidentiality and people's rights. There are lots of situations that we cannot write down all of the details that fit all of the circumstances and all of them. We will try and do the best we can. We will have all the expert opinions we can to get us to that point. But there may be circumstances where we can't just envision some set of issues that may come up in the future. And all we can say is that we'll deal with those specifically and we'll involve the experts at the time if we need to. But I think we can have these in-depth conversations on each pieces of each of these programs and implement good quality standards and take care of our employees and provide good benefits. So I would say we leave here today. Allison and I can propose a date here in the next few days, week or so, and a couple of topics, and we'll start at the bottom and we'll start working our way through it. In the meantime, we'll keep working on the answers with Liebert Cassidy and sit down with staff and talk through the personnel handbook and start talking through these 11 issues and figure out, you know, and I'm not so sure that there aren't other issues. I've got a list of 11. I know verbally and talking to a couple of people have raised a couple of other questions that are their individual topics. So I think the 11 is a good starting point. Most of the 11 that we're talking about here are all contained within the what we anticipated in the class and comp study in a couple of other places. So nothing here is a, did I miss something?
That there was a dog or something.
Oh. Nothing on this list of 11 is a out of the blue, never heard of, where did that come from kind of thought. Some of these have we've been having some conversations over the years about how do you do it and what is it and how to compare to other agencies. So I wouldn't say there's any big surprises here. I think we have the data on a bunch of them that I think will be beneficial to the conversation.
I think those are all good ideas. I would colleagues' agreement suggest that as we go through these topics one by one, once this committee reaches a consensus on a topic, that we take it separately to the board.
Yeah, I wasn't going to
The
wait,
board only meets monthly.
and I didn't want to
Change too.
Sure. And I didn't want to wait till the end and store up 15 little packages and wait till the end. So
Delay implementing some good things.
if we can get through a couple of foundational organizational things and then start chewing through some of these benefit discussions, I don't see any reason we can't implement them as they get sort of packaged and approved. And we can write the language in the personnel handbook, sequentially. We don't have to write the whole handbook all at once. We can rewrite chapter 5. Hey, we're going to deal with overtime and double time. Okay, let's rewrite. I don't even know if it's chapter 5, but we'll rewrite chapter 5 and say this is our new now standard for overtime and double time. And chapter 5 is updated and it goes to the whole board. And while we may still be working on other things, totally appropriate.
Communicating that same message to the entire staff as frequently as possible is going to go a long way as well.
That's why we're having tomorrow's meeting. It's mandatory. It's not, hey, I'm going to come talk to this group and that group all in the same room. Somebody's question in one group may not be heard by somebody in a different group if we do them in 2 different meetings, all in one meeting, everybody here, mandatory. And as we come up with then a topic, say, hey, we think we've worked through overtime. Then we'll have a meeting and say, hey, here's what we think is happening on overtime or standby or 457 matching or this or that or whatever the topic is. There's probably 15 benefit pieces.
Well, I'm willing to set aside all my Mondays
So I would,
whenever it makes sense to have a meeting. Obviously, we have to quit before 6 o'clock on 4th Mondays so that we can have a regular board meeting. I also have 3rd Mondays that I have to be out of here probably by 6:30 or so.
maybe tomorrow, Allison can look out at a calendar, send it to you all and say, do these Mondays work? Do these Tuesdays work? Does this time work? 4 o'clock work? By the way, as it relates to staff, we do these meetings at 4. They're all free to come to this at 4 o'clock. There is, hold them.
Standard hours is 7 to 4.
Well, it's different for different crews. The field crews are off at 3:30, but staff is here till 5. But if a staff member who's here till 5 and wants to come to the meeting, they should have that opportunity to come to that meeting during working hours. So this is free and open to staff, no matter what the hour. Pick 4 o'clock for this one.
And Chair Pelosi, I have a speaker card, and just in the interest of staff time going forward, do we want to address these at the beginning of each agenda item they want to speak at, or do you want to wait till the end, till the board
Well,
is done?
this is sort of an omnibus agenda item.
I never know exactly.
Public
what
comment
topic.
should come between the introduction of the topic and deliberations. And we haven't done a lot of deliberating here, except to say, here's things that we think we need to do. We haven't made any decisions tonight. We haven't deliberated on something and made a decision. And public comment should come before that.
So it's a speaker
Comment,
card.
a comment on it.
No, this is a speaker card on a specific agenda item, so it's not it doesn't fall under public comment because public comment is agenda items that are not disclosed in advance. So this, you can do it anytime. It's just.
Potential problem in terms, yes.
And I get them
There's
very
a public comment period under each agenda item as well as
correct.
public comment for non-agendized items.
And I get these very vague, so I don't know specifically what they're going to talk about. Mostly it's just as I want to make a statement. Otherwise, I would be more helpful about
Well,
when.
let's,
Kelly, you're up.
okay with you, let's go ahead.
Speaker card on there says your agenda item. So I write number 5, but when you have 3 topics in one, it comes across as vague. But if you had them as like 5, 6, and 7, then I could have put like 5 for number 6, number 7. Continuing Personnel Committee. I asked the committee to prioritize developing the employee satisfaction survey and evaluating the responses prior to addressing the class and comp study and personnel handbook changes. Responses from the survey may impact the direction of the class and comp study and personnel handbook changes. Also, it provides an honest response from the employees and helps eliminate self-serving explanations of the results. Thank you for your time and consideration.
You. Briefer than most. Obviously heartfelt.
Also like to say something on card. I spoke in November, and so I just kind of wanted to chime in again. I had then and still have now complete confidence in the committee, the board, and management moving forward with this. I can appreciate it's a sensitive topic and an arduous process. And after the last meeting, we had a all-hands staff meeting where Jeff said the same thing that he told you. He told us, which is, I have an open door, and if you have any questions, feel free to come by. He said that at an all-hands meeting, and a lot of us have taken advantage of that. He's spent a lot of time with us, myself included, walking us through different aspects of the personnel handbook and all of that. So I just wanted to let you know that he has done that. And I appreciate your guys' time and management's time and the attention to detail that everyone's taking on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah.
Just wanted you guys to
If
know.
we don't take this seriously, we shouldn't be here.
I appreciate that.
What else do you want to?
I would just,
We'll take care of scheduling.
yeah, so we'll schedule and I'll put a couple of topics on. I kind of, on the class and comp study, it's organizational chart. On the personnel handbook, it's sort of just which chapters we need to edit based on a theme. Hey, this is vague, this needs to be fixed, this is legal. Not too much description, but we'll be able to flip through the handbook and we'll print a list by chapter of what the theme is, issues that we need to change. And so I would schedule those first, along with then receiving, the survey examples and bring those back to you to sort of, here's 2, 3, 4, how do you want to do it? How do you want to include it? So that would kind of be the first set of topics. And then in the meeting, we can kind of discuss how quickly we're going through them and how much, more you want to see and how fast. But we'll start and then we'll see how quickly we can go.
Like that, my suggestion would be when you have your all hands meeting and you have a list of 11 or more, that the top 2 or 3 that are more universal, and let's list them separately at the next personnel committee meeting. And that way people can choose what they want to talk about.
Maybe I'll put together a list of like the 15 benefit areas in topic name, base pay, sick leave, vacation, holidays, and maybe we have a program or this is a thought on a new program. And so maybe you see the whole list of sort of the things that go into the comparative results on a class and comp study. We can put together that list pretty quick. We won't have the data on them, but we can say, here's the list of topics. We'll list the 11, but I didn't want to send this out sort of dissemination process.
And it's not necessarily complete yet.
Well, I think it's not complete. There's a couple of duplicates, a couple of things on here. The wording, I think it could go a couple of different ways. And so I didn't want to be presumptive and this is what it means. So I need to sit down with a couple of people and say, you know, somebody wrote a letter that says this, that really mean? Get some clarity.
And try to stick to single topics as much as possible. I learned for 40 years of writing proposals to people like you when you were on the government side, that if you name 2 topics in a numbered thing, the second one is likely to be ignored. First one will be answered and the second will be ignored. Not deliberately, not maliciously, but because of human nature. And so I learned to keep all the questions short in single topic. I wish Congress would do the same thing, but that's another problem. But let's do that and let's get another meeting as soon as we can here.
Perfect.
Any last things you want to throw in at the moment, Jim?
As long as you can have a standing item on the agenda about.
Well, I thought at each meeting we would tackle a survey question, handbook question, and a class and comp question, and may work through one of those quicker than others, but we wouldn't not do something if we could.
Hoping that we won't do a survey question once a week, one question a week.
No, it's a topic on the agenda for the survey. Whole.
Okay. All right, we're in agreement.
So we'd have
For the survey every meeting, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. Any other business before the committee?
Just want to thank Jeff for his perseverance through this process.
We're gonna meet a lot. We'll get to spend some time with each other.
Oh, boy.
And thank you to staff for not being shy, because unspoken grievances, we'll call it that, not doing anyone any good. There's a problem, you need to surface it. There may not be a solution that you like the problem, but not having the problem surfaced is worse than not having it settled to your satisfaction. So please keep that up. Don't be shy at the all hands meeting. And we will continue to take all of this seriously.
So one more personnel issue. Today, Jocelyn Mata started. She is a temp. We just, with only Allison and Taylor up front, we brought in a temp.
Sounds pretty frantic.
You know, it's fine if the day is slow, but a busy day and a lunch hour and a sick day, and it was getting to be too much. So we brought in a temp. She's got general office experience and hitting the ground running today. So if you see somebody that you've never seen before, Joss or Jocelyn would be fine.
Sir Jocelyn, okay. Like a receptionist / gatekeeper.
And helping out lift the stuff. So while we go through this process before we fill positions permanently, before we decide on positions permanently, bring somebody in who can just help us get our work done and be responsive to the public. And then once we get positions finalized, then we can hire somebody that has the qualifications for the position we need I mean, this is all based on district need. Keep that in mind, but she's gonna come in and help us out here for a while and go from there.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I did have one last question. And this was about this exceedingly long table right now of labor category numbers and steps within each. I'm curious how much overlap there is and what is the difference between this line and the line just above it or just below it, whichever is higher, more highly compensated. Is it objective standards? You need an additional certification?
So the latter, there's
69, 170, whatever.
there's a lot of overlap. And so as you go A through E, there's 5% between each lateral step. And then there's 1% between each rung on the ladder. And so in theory,
So you're overlapping several rungs.
yes. And the reason is you're looking at someone at a snapshot in time. And so a position, we want to make sure that whatever position we have, that their starting salary and the ladder across to their highest salary matches the comparables to like jobs, like agencies. But you could have somebody, you could hire somebody, the low end starting. You could have a different position in an unrelated department, a couple of ladder rungs lower, all the way out at an E, who could make more than that person. Well, each line is based on a person. It's not based on who makes more, which position makes more here or there. You're looking at a position with an A through E that matches their lowest to their highest for that position. But you're right, somebody lower on the ladder, but many more years experience, and in the event of a longevity bonus, may actually make more than someone starting out at a different rung on the ladder. So you have a lot of spots on the ladder that you never use. One of the problems we had when I first came here was we didn't have a ladder at all. We just had this person makes this much money. And so we said, wait a minute, now, how does that person grow, or how does that salary change, or how is it comparable over time? And so the ladder is just a ladder. It's just numbers. It's 5% across, 1% down.
But if you're a 107, a 106 makes 1% more. Is there a difference in the qualifications or the
Different, it may be a different position. You may have a treatment plant operator and an admin person. So a
way?
106E,
Market forces take care of some of that difference. Sure.
so a 106E may make more than a 107A. But the 107A through E matches that person, and a 106A through E matches this position. So the
Set of responsibilities and
entirely.
yeah.
You could have 3 ladder rows in a row with an admin, an operations, and an engineering. Because that A through E matches what that A through E should match for that job.
Only 20 jobs and there's 242
There's a lot of
rungs or something like that, so.
But we're going to get way down in the weeds on bandwidth and ladders and numbers and where a job position should be to match, another agency, where a person is.
Okay. Please go ahead.
One thing out of, it's completely away from this topic, so I can take it after we're done with that. Not anything that's,
It's not
Okay.
committee business.
it's not specific to the committee. When I was pulling weeds today, I had one of the frequent bike path users stop. Told me that we should have more brakes along the path, so more of it gets fixed the way They even came out in Casita Springs. They're really happy with it.
Well, I appreciate their
Passion?
passion for the end result. The process of how we get things paved is maybe not we shouldn't have pipe breaks to pave trails.
Yeah, I told them that wasn't gonna work.
Whole trail is going to be paved.
They've just really,
Everybody keeps asking what section we're gonna do next, and we're like, no, we're done with our sections.
There being no obvious other business before the committee, at 6:10, we're adjourned.